Next, we have the embryonic period. And in the germinal period, which we talked about previously, I said that the differentiation of cells starts to occur during the germinal period, meaning that the cells get their marching orders to what they're going to do in regards to if they're going to be eventually made in, the cells will eventually be made into an organ, or if it will be made into an arm, a limb, or the brain. They get their marching orders. During the embryonic period, that differentiation of the cells intensifies. During the embryonic period, that occurs from about 2 weeks to 8 weeks after conception. So embryonic period begins when the germinal period ends, and the support system for cells form and organs start to appear. Because the organs start to appear, we get the cells begin to form organs such as the heart. And during this embryonic period, that is when the heart begins to beat. You also get the arms, legs, face, other organs, and different muscles all develop. So during the time between 2 to 8 weeks after conception, during the embryonic period, when you go to the doctor to get an ultrasound and you get the sonogram, that's pictured here, you're able to see more of the face and the legs and arms during this time, because that's when those parts of the body start to develop. Something else that occurs during the embryonic period is organogenesis. And organogenesis is just saying that the major organs are being formed. Not only are the major organs starting to form, as I stated, the organs begin to function. And that is where you can hear the heartbeat between 2 weeks of conception, after conception, and 8 weeks after conception. So now, instead of us looking at the cells, now it gets another name. The mass of cells that was in the germinal period now develops, and it turns into an embryo. And there are 3 layers of cells formed in the embryo. We have the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm. And every body part that you have now, currently, that we all have, they originally developed from these 3 layers in the embryo. So we're going to define each of the layers of the embryo. We're first going to begin with the endoderm. And the endoderm is the inner layer of cells. Endoderm is the inner layer of cells. That eventually is going to produce the internal body parts. Since it is the inner layer of cells, when you think about inside of our body are the digestive system, the respiratory system, the internal body parts is what will eventually develop from the endoderm. The mesoderm is the middle layer. And when we think about the middle layer of our body, you can think about like the circulatory system, our bones, our muscles, even our reproductive system. And then we have the ectoderm, which is the outermost layer. And you think about the ectoderm, the outermost layer of our own bodies. You can look and see, this is the part that you see. The skin parts, sensory receptors, such as your ears, your nose, your eyes, all of those things where we receive sensory from. Our hair and even our nails. And it also includes the outermost layer, the ectoderm, also will become the nervous system in the brain. So all of these parts are very important for us to, as they develop in the mother's womb, because they will eventually be the parts that we need, the body parts that we need to function outside of our mother's womb. The embryonic period also is a time where systems of life support develop rapidly. And there are a few things that I want you all to keep in mind when we think about life support systems. So obviously we have this embryo inside the mother's womb. Inside of the mother's womb, there is something called amnion fluid or amnion membrane. When you think about the word amnion, I want you all to think about an envelope or even a bag. And there is this clear fluid that the embryo floats around. And that clear fluid, it regulates the temperature in the womb to make sure that the embryo is warm as it's growing in its mother's womb. And it's also a shock absorber. So if, something happens to the mother and, she may, something may happen and something happens to her stomach, since the amnion fluid is a shock absorber, the amnion fluid is going to get most of the pressure and is still going to protect the baby. The umbilical cord is also something that is formed during the embryonic period. And you think about the umbilical cord, that is what connects the baby to the placenta. And speaking of placenta, the placenta is just tissue where small blood vessels from the mom and the offspring, they intertwine, but they do not join. And that is where the child gets their nutrients from. It's from the placenta, and the placenta is connected to the baby through the umbilical cord. That allows for nutrients to pass from mother to child. The last period that we're going to talk about in regards to prenatal development is the fetal period. The fetal period begins around 2 months after conception, and it typically ends with birth. During this time, growth and development continuously happen during this time, and it occurs dramatically. So let's talk about the fetus period or the fetal period around the 3rd month. So around the 3rd month, the fetus is, like I said, it's no longer an embryo. It's now called a fetus. And the fetus is about 3 inches long and weighs about 3 ounces. And we get to see more of the facial features. We get to see more of the face and the eyelids, the forehead, and, the arms, the hands, the lower limbs. Those are the other body parts that are also able to be seen around the 3rd month and will be able to be more and more, seen as the fetus grows inside of the mother's womb. We have to talk about fetus viability. And when we're talking about fetus viability, think about the word viable. When we talk about the word viable, that is when a child is able to survive outside of the mother's womb. And this occurs around 6 months of pregnancy. 6 months after conception, if a child is born, early at around 6 months, they are technically able to survive outside of the womb. Again, the name for the age that a fetus can live outside of the womb is the age of viability. And that occurs between 22 and 25 weeks, so around the 6-month mark. Okay, I'm going to see you all on the next video where we're going to talk about brain development. Ciao!